What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Frank's Media and Reviews, and welcome to my fifth episode of my video series, The Physical Media Collectors, the Physical Media Club. Uh, this is the video series where I get to connect with people in different various communities, such as the physical media world, the horror genre, and film reviewers. Today's guest started his channel in 2022. He has over 2,000 subscribers. This man, my man, has the hottest and most unconventional horror movie takes on YouTube, and I think he may be sponsored by Vinegar Syndrome. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Chris from the Nightmare Collective.
What's up, everybody? I wish I was sponsored by Vinegar Syndrome. I think I
Yeah,
give them enough money.
yeah, I
If they're
know.
listening
Kidding.
to this, they should send me something.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. How's it going, Frank? How's it going?
Good. Just messing up a little bit, but
Hey, this is YouTube. It's fine.
yeah, it's all good. There's that edit button.
Yeah, you can just edit everything out.
Yeah, no
You know.
kidding, man. Yeah, so thanks for coming on to my video series, man.
I'm
It's been a
excited. I'm
long
excited.
time.
Yep.
So how the interview's gonna go, I'm gonna just ask you a couple icebreaker questions and then we'll just kind of get into the interview.
Sounds good.
All right. First icebreaker question is, what's been your favorite memory with your wife during your relationship?
It's a good question. I think maybe just like doing specific things, like going out and doing things. We're pretty homebodies, so we don't go do a lot.
Hmm.
We don't have kids or anything, so it's like I think it's harder sometimes for us to go out and do things. And ironically, the funny thing is, my wife does not like movies. I know that may be a weird thing, but my wife hates movies. Like, you know, so she has like 4 favorite movies. So I think it's my good memories of her are just like getting her to watch a movie and like going to the movies and like her actually enjoying that movie.
Okay.
So I think the movie was called, like, when we were first dating, it was called The House, and it had
Okay.
Will Ferrell in it, and it's not a great movie, but that was one that like I drug her to, and she was like, because she really will only watch comedies, she just doesn't really like anything like that. So we went and saw that. So I mean, that was a fun time. So I think anytime I can get her to actually watch a movie, and it's not that bad, or she's like, it's not that bad. Like, she actually went and saw like the Mario movie and stuff like that. So it's like she will go see certain things,
Uh-huh.
but like she'll never watch a horror movie ever.
Yeah.
So my YouTube channel beginnings are, hey, I need to talk to somebody about horror, and it's not my wife, who I spend 90% of my time with. So I figured that was the way. But I think it's that. I think it's just, anytime I'm able to get her to actually like sit down and watch something,
Hmm.
like, because what she'll do is, like, I really wanted her to watch The Shawshank Redemption. She had never
Hmm.
seen it before.
Classic. Yeah.
And so I bought it on 4K, did the whole thing. I'm like, cool, we're going to sit down, we're going to watch it. And damn it, if she didn't watch the thing without me, like, you know, she
Yeah.
was like, I just decided to watch it. And it was like on Netflix. And I'm like, my God, like, so not only did I spend like $30 on this 4K to
Yeah.
watch it, and now you've watched it on Netflix. Like, that's her. She doesn't care. She will look at a movie and be like, I don't see the difference. So it's the funniest thing. We are opposites in that way. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, I need this $4,000 TV. And she's like, yeah, why? Like,
Yeah.
she just doesn't get surround sound. So it's funny that we are like together. We are complete opposites in that facet. So it does make it nice when I can find a movie that, she's actually interested in or getting to watch with.
Your
Or
wife
like,
definitely sounds like my wife in that
yeah.
aspect. So, oh my God. What was your favorite memory growing up as a kid?
Uh, Probably, I think getting, my mom, love my mom. But she let me watch wild stuff when I was a child. It was a
Hmm.
different time, obviously, growing up. So she would just throw me in front of the TV. I, played a lot of video games, but like, I think just remembering like kind of, and I've been thinking about it lately too, like when I covered like the Tales from the Crypt movie, like Demon Knight, just like thinking about like the stuff that I was watching at like 5 and 6 and how
Hmm.
that has shaped me now. Like, so I think it's just being able to like get to watch that stuff as a child, which is weird. Yes, it, permanently destroyed my brain, and now nothing is scary. And I probably should be afraid of some things, and I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's it. Just being able to just like watching that stuff with my mom, because she's really into like she's really into like true crime and horror and stuff. But the movie that broke my mom, because she was a teenager at the time, was Nightmare on Elm Street 2. She actually worked at the movie theater when it came out, went and saw it. She has never watched a horror movie since that horror movie. So it's one of those things that, like, my mom was really into a lot of that stuff as a kid. So she let me watch it all, and she would occasionally watch it, but she was terrified of Freddy, and that movie like broke her. So it's just weird that, like, because she used to like sit at home as a teenager, like watch movies in the dark and do all that stuff, and it broke her. So it's like, I see where I get it from, because she like nothing phased her like when she would watch this stuff. So now I think she's just converted it where now she just watches all the true crime stuff, and I'm like, that stuff's worse because it's real. You're just like absorbing all this like demented stuff. It just really happened. I'm just at least watching like, like weird stuff. It's super gory, but it's pretty unrealistic. What's gonna happen. So I think that's my favorite memory as a child. Just like, she didn't take it and like prevent me from doing that stuff. She had a love for the horror, and even though she didn't watch it anymore, she wanted to introduce me to the thing that at one point she had loved. So, she even bought me a Tales from the Crypt doll that I still have. And she would scare me with it. So he's still there, but he has like changing outfits, and he has a little button on his belly that you can tape, and he'll laugh. So, and then for a while, like me and my stepdad would like swap it every Christmas. We'd give it back to each other. We'd just wrap it and give it back to each other, because my mom hated it being in her bedroom. So that's probably the fondest memory of it as a kid. Like, just, getting introduced to that horror that way. And even though my mom doesn't like it anymore, I just like that she like let me kind of find it on my own.
Yeah. That's awesome. Heck yeah, man. I always love listening to people, how they got into the horror genre. Because obviously everyone's different, but kind of common theme, at least what I've found, is that the 80s, early 90s parents were like, nah.
Yeah, it's whatever, man. Watch whatever you want.
Whatever.
It's like it's like just a marathon,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it's fun.
I love it. So I mentioned that you started your channel back in 2022. What made you want to start the channel?
So interesting enough, like I don't think I started YouTube for the same reasons everybody else does. Like, I think it was kind of like on a whim. So I was working at a job, and I still work for the same company, but I had a group of friends. And so like I worked with a guy who was really into horror. And so we just got to talking one day about a movie. And so we just started talking about, this specific movie. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool, like, to watch a video. And so we were like searching for a specific video on this topic, and it didn't exist. It was like a weird, obscure movie. And we're like, oh man, we were just like trying to find information about the movie or just what it was about, and we couldn't find any of it. So I obviously love like Red Letter Media and stuff like that. So it's like, I've always watched B movies. I had a similar thing in college and growing up where we'd have a movie night and like hang out and do all that stuff. And then as you get older, that goes away. You just end up watching them by yourself. But it was still a fun time where I was like, and it's ironic that like I started my channel the way that I did, because I really didn't go that aspect. I had a lot of ideas, and I actually made like 10 videos that I never produced and never edited and put out, that were along those lines of more what I do now. But I think I got wrapped up in, I'd say like the biggest person I watched at the time that really got me to do it. I don't think I have that YouTuber that I was like, I watched them and then wanted to do YouTube. Whereas like most people, I think, like have all these creators like, oh, I love all this stuff. I didn't watch a lot of physical media or horror content. I did it, but I didn't watch a lot of it. Good Bad Flicks is probably my entry point, because even though he does things very differently than I do, he's taking more of a comedic route and like kind of, taking stabs at these movies. We cover a lot of similar type of movies where it's like obscure action movies, obscure, horror stuff. And so I think that at least gave me the bridge to be like, hey, there's an audience of people that want to hear about these weirder movies. I think it took me a long time, because I went the route of like talking about new movies and was like, okay, I didn't really know what kind of content creator I wanted to be. But I mean, that's kind of why I started. And then basically what happened is I made a video in my room with my phone, and I showed it to that dude, and he was like, cool. And he showed it to his friend, and then it was funny. Somebody made a comment. It was a friend of his that he's like, oh man, it was like my second or third video. He's like, oh, up become a YouTuber material, where it was like, he's like, he saw something where he's like, no, this guy, he can get there, just the more he talked about it. Cause I was a pretty good speaker, throughout school. I did a lot of, you know, I was in a lot of plays growing up, so I was, you know, very comfortable like talking to people, like, and so the camera was a weird thing. I think that's why I purchased the camera very early on, because like when I
Mhm.
had a phone, there was just a disconnect with me talking about it. Whereas like as soon as I got my camera, it was like it melted away, and it was just so easy for me to just talk.
Mhm.
So I just kept making them, and he kept watching them. And there was a couple other people that I worked with that were a little younger. So I had him closer to my age, and a couple kids in their 20s that were watching my stuff, being like, "No, that's bad. No, that's bad. Like, don't do that. Cut all this out." So
Yeah.
I had a really good like small support team of people that weren't necessarily like my best friends or had any connection. They were just people that I worked with, but it was a good like bias of like, hey, we're gonna watch your stuff and like be really critical of what you're making, and just it so it did help me really kind of find what I wanted to do. And I think I covered new movies for about a year. Um and I didn't really do physical media either. I think my first like 4K review was Halloween Ends, which is or Halloween, yeah, I think it was Halloween Ends.
Mhm.
No, Halloween Kills, I think. Yeah, Halloween Kills was the one that I did. I got the 4K of that, and I think that was the first like review I ever did. And then it kind of went away, and then it came back, and so I try to balance it out now. But I think that was kind of my first foray into it, and then I stopped covering new movies altogether. And then kind of found really what I had started. You know, I made an update, I think like a year and a half in. And I was like, you know, I think I've kind of lost what I set out to do. I got
Mhm.
wrapped up in like being the YouTuber and like doing all these things and like, oh, it'd be cool to see these movies free. And then I was like, yeah, I don't care though. Like it's just I kind of see how those people are like handled. It's always like a fight because people have so many opinions on these new movies and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I just want to talk about weird movies. And yeah, most of the movies I watch are bad. So there's no like hot takes of like, hey, this movie's bad. And you're like, yeah, I know. I know it's bad.
Yeah.
That's why I'm watching it. So I think it's just a more relaxed take. I get to introduce people to movies that they may have never heard before. And it's a chance for me to revisit those movies or watch new stuff. So I think that's why I took the route that I took. That's a
Yeah.
very long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries, buddy. No worries. Yeah, because we'll talk about it a little bit. Actually, probably just in a few minutes. So, um, I liked in your first video because in your first video you basically kind of state how you're just gonna go for it. Like you mentioned how, and you briefly talk about how you're just filming on your camera,
Mhm.
but if you didn't really do it that point, it's kind of
Mhm.
like you're not gonna do it, or at least it kind of gave you the motivation. You might as
Yeah.
well just do it. And there's that camera, and so because that I obviously really can relate to that, and I'm sure many others as well, because you just have that momentum at least in your head to like start the channel, and it's you just got to do it, right? It's that first step. So I really like that video. And one of the things that you just kind of touched about um is well, actually, hold on really quick. uh how do you balance your YouTube channel and your personal life?
Okay. It can be difficult, and I know we've chatted offline personally a little bit about the break that I took recently. You know, I took about a month off. Like, so I'm a manager at a big chain store, so you know I very busy. I run a 24-hour store, so like it could be all the time. You know, work is work. You know, I'm pretty good at what I do, so it's not like I wouldn't say it's stressful, but it's constant.
Hmm.
And so it was I think it was pretty easy in the beginning for me to do it because I wasn't doing that. And then when I moved about a year ago, that was why I moved to get promoted and I took on like a lot more load. And so I think before it was really easy
Hmm.
because I had a pretty easy schedule and I wasn't everything. I was just an assistant manager and I could walk away. It was easy to be like, "Oh, this is not my problem. I can just go."
Hmm.
So I made videos all the time. And plus I think I was learning, so I balanced it pretty easy because it was like that draw to be like, "Oh, I'm curious of like how to do this thing." Now I think it is more like once you get deeper into YouTube, and I mean, this is something you'll find the more you go like doing it is I think you'll hit a point where you're like you look at the numbers a lot and you're like, "Oh, I put a lot of time into this video," and then 20 people watched it, 50 people watched it. And I think you can overthink a lot of that stuff too. Same with me. I really like the video part of YouTube, and I really like the thumbnail part, and I really like all that stuff. So for me, it was good because I had somewhat of a video background. So like once I got that stuff, I was happy to kind of learn that stuff. I know not a lot of people like editing and stuff like that. I love that stuff. I love editing. So for me, I'm constantly thinking like, how can I up my production of what I'm doing? And it's funny that I'm like, I have so much production and talking about something that I paid $5 for from the
Hmm.
70s that no one cares about. So I think
Yeah.
that's like the weird thing in my videos. But I think now it's more I had to found the balance now of like I'm making one, maybe two videos a week. The second one is usually a 4K review. So I just kind of sat down and really thought about it when I had my break and like, what do I really want to talk about? And do I put the time in to do it? But I don't want it to take away from my personal life because it was like I was
Mm.
like I lost my hobbies when I was making 4 videos a week. It was like so destructive because I was like, man, I wasn't really spending time with my wife and I wasn't really spending time doing anything else.
Mhm.
So I was like watching movies just for content. Like, and I don't even really like that word. I really like just I felt like I was making content. I didn't feel
Mhm.
like I was making like videos. I didn't feel like I was being informative or like having any type of personality. It's just like, here's this thing. This is what I think about it. And I'm out. Which honestly, I don't want to call these YouTubers out, but that's the thing I hate about movie reviewers is that like short stuff that gives you nothing. That is just like spineless and opinionless, where it's just like, hey, I went and solved this thing. It's fine. And that's it. Like there's no opinion in it. There's no like, what do you actually think about it? Like,
Mhm.
what is your opinion? Because that's why I'm following you. I'm following you for a person. So I think I had to decide, like, look, I'm gonna make one video. I'm gonna put a lot of my personality into it. I'm gonna put a lot of my actual opinions on it. I mean, and most people will know that it's maybe weird. This is how I am in and outside of YouTube. I don't really have like a persona or anything. It's pretty much how I am. So I think that's why it's easier for me to do it because I'm not pitting anything on. So
Mhm.
I think that's how I balanced it. I just kind of decided like this is what I'm gonna do, and I've kind of stuck to that. Where it's like every Sunday, I'll watch a movie before that. I'll sit down, I'll make my video, and I put that out. And there's a 4K. I don't try to like plan them out too much, but I kind of know what's coming out, just like I'm sure you do. You're like, I know these movies are coming out, so let me put them in there. And so I know those, and then sometimes it'll sneak up, and I'm like, oh, I forgot I bought this. I'll talk about that movie. But for the most part, I kind of will have a schedule. I'll write it out on a whiteboard. Like these are the movies I'd like to cover.
Mhm.
And then if I find something, I'll like pop it in. I might add something back in. So like I recently got like Midnight 2 and I'd covered the original Midnight. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to cover that because I didn't even know there was a sequel to that movie, but now I want to cover it. So I'll switch stuff around like that. But that's kind of how I balanced it. I just kind of was like, I gave myself an easy goal where I could make 4 to like up at most 8 videos a month. And then that was kind of how I balance everything else. And so I can
Okay.
stick to that schedule and then I'm good.
A nice little template. So
Yeah.
one of the things, so you actually just touched upon it is taking a break. So like a mental health.
Yeah. I
It's
just watched
very
your video
important.
about that.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, buddy. um, yeah. Can if you don't mind, can you talk about that a little bit? Like what made you want to take that break, maybe what was happening you know during that time. You're like, hey, because you mentioned it, I mean, I've been following you for a little while, but
Yeah.
like that was the moment, like you said that, and you said in your video that you
Mm.
clearly just needed to step back a little bit, maybe like a soft reset. Um so
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I think every YouTuber has that like break in their content at some points where they're
mm,
like, I think it happens more if you're not as like massively successful. I think if you just kind of like blow up, it's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing the thing that made me successful. Whereas I
mhm,
think when you're like on our level, you're constantly trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. So you want to try a bunch of stuff. And I think for me too, like I said, I if I did this full time, I would make 1,000 videos. I would overwork myself because that's just what I like to do because I like creating videos.
mhm,
But I think I had to take the break because I got to a point where it wasn't fun making videos. That was my first thing. I had to like force myself to sit down, and it may not come across like that, but it was one of those things that I was like, because I think once I'm sitting down and I'm doing the video, it's fine. But it was more like I don't even know what I'm covering. I'm buying a lot of movies to do these 4Ks that I actually do not want, which is one thing I talked about. And I I just was buying stuff to cover it when there was like no return. It made no sense. It made no sense to buy Freaky on 4K when I don't give a shit about the movie. Like it
Mhm.
didn't make any sense. So it was like, why am I covering like, because I'm not necessarily like a full blown physical media channel. It would make more sense if I was, but I'm really not. I sprinkle them in, but I'm not just a 4K reviewer. You know, I primarily still do like old horror movie reviews. So I think I had just had to like sit back and make that adjustment and be like, and I think that's because Nightmare Flashbacks was a thing I made a long time ago
Yeah.
and it went away. Like it was one of those things that like I did that pretty early on in my channel. Actually, my first video with my camera, or my second video with my camera was Flatliners. So that was the first time where I know you don't like that movie, but
Yeah, I don't like.
he doesn't
I
like the
like that
4K.
movie.
He doesn't
Yeah,
like the 4K.
oh yeah.
But that was one of those things where I think I really, and I still think, funnily enough, even though I don't think there's a lot of energy in that video, because I've learned a lot about like just like engagement and like being like having more of like my personality on display. I think that video, like I have a lot of good insight. Like I went back and watched that video and I was like, man, like you can tell that I like care about that movie and like the
Mhm.
concepts that are in that movie. And so I needed a better way to present it, obviously, but I think that was the first time that I kind of lost something then. And I went astray. I went this different path of like I went to new movie review. That was the thing. Like I split and was like, I could have gone two paths and I was trying to do both of them. And that's very difficult. So I ended up just being like, I reflected on that. And a friend of mine actually said that too. He was like, man, I kind of miss that stuff
Mhm.
that you talked about. Cause like he doesn't really watch the movies, but it was one of those things that he's like, I just kind of get to listen to you talk about these bad movies. And sometimes you really do enjoy them. Sometimes they're really good and sometimes they're terrible. And so it was one of those things I think that I probably lost a lot of the original people that I had because they may have been there for that. Like, and then it kind of went away because I found that like my engagement wasn't the same. Like nobody was commenting really on those new movie reviews, or they'd be like, great review, or like, oh, I hated this movie, or I love this movie. That was it. But there really was no discussion about the actual movies and so now I think I pretty much, I have a lot of dedicated people that I talk to, like, and I get to actually have conversations about these movies that are weirder. So even though it's like, it's smaller and closer knit, I feel way more passionate about the movies that I'm making. So I think that's what it was. It's just like, it was either do this or quit. And I know I didn't
Mhm.
really publicly speak about that a lot, but it kind of got to a point where I was like, man, I have to just accept where I'm at, like views wise, all this stuff. And I need to go back to what I originally like the root of and like why I started YouTube, which was to talk about those movies and to
Mhm.
find them for myself, but also introduce other people into them. And then if I wasn't going to do that and if that didn't work, then that was kind of going to be it for me. So it really was like a make or break moment where like if I had come back and it didn't work, I don't know
Mhm.
that we'd be having this conversation. Like, and I know I'd briefly talked to you about that too,
Mhm.
but funnily enough, it was Killer Clowns that kind of brought me back. Like, that's the first video of it, and that video was very successful. So I think it was one of those things that I really sat down and I watched that movie, and I love that movie, and it's so fun and it's so weird and it's so
Mhm.
quirky that watching that kind of like re-sparked me and was like, you know what? This is why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing. It's not for the views. It's not for all this other stuff. It's just because I like to talk about these movies.
Mhm.
So it kind of brought that joy back. And then I have been on a roll, I think, ever since then, like I think I'm very proud of the videos that I'm making. I've had to kind of refine how to talk about the movies, which has been kind of an up and down. Like, how do I want it? Do I want these videos to be 25 minutes long or 8 minutes long? Like,
Yeah.
I think I'm still balancing that out to kind of figure out. And I'm probably will have a little bit of both, but I think that's kind of where I'm at now with like my mental health. I'm way better, off than I was 2 months ago. So
Good,
yeah.
good, good. Yeah, yeah. Because those subscribers on my channel, I plug
Mhm.
your channel, I plug like Skin Crawlers and Bearded Film Guy.
Yeah.
Like I really like, at least I've been trying to find more content creators who are into more obscure horror. um and I think you were the one who told me about Severin maybe a while ago. And
Yeah. We talked
then
about Severin. Yep.
yeah, and then I saw like Bearded Film Guy's video and Skin Crawlers, and I was like, there's just a different type of horror that's a lot of people just don't kind of talk about, and that's one of the things why I liked your channel. Why I gravitated towards it, and so and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you. One, you're a badass person, but two is that like I wanted to make sure that people know uh, about other content that isn't like kind of like the popular content, within the horror, you know, uh, community or genre,
Oh yeah.
and so. Um, yeah, and then also you talked about it just really quick is that we can talk about it just a little bit is the support that you found organically within your subscribers. Um, my question was going to be, what's been the highs and lows of you being a content creator, but you kind of touched upon it yourself,
Mm.
in a sense of where you kind of rediscovered what you wanted to do as a content creator. You got that feedback, that positive feedback, that to keep doing what you wanted to originally do. So anyway, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean I mean that is the high. I think too. Like, I've been very lucky too. I think similar to you that my wife has been very, very supportive. And it was one of those things that I think in the very beginning we always joke about it, but she always tells me that if I didn't think you were gonna make it, I would have told you very bluntly, like that, like this isn't gonna work or that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went to her a lot. My wife is a very talented artist, so like whenever I was like designing my thumbnails or anything that had to do with like the look of my channel, it was always through her being like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Because she's so unbiased. She's not in YouTube. She's just looking at it from like a graphic design point and an artist point of view. Like, do you think this looks good and not cheesy?
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of cheese on YouTube. You got to have a little bit of like cheese to kind of make it. You're not a business. It can't be too corporate. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to kind of be like, because originally, funny enough, like I paid somebody very early on to make my original intro because I was like, man, I wanted something that was cooler, and I didn't have the ability at the time to make that. So, my original logo, I made all that stuff and I designed all that stuff and learned through that. But my original intro, which I used for a long time, was actually made by somebody else, funnily enough, and it just worked. It just because I actually had a tagline. I mean, you probably remember that I, used to say some doors should never be open, and it was a tagline, and I had a door, and I had a very cohesive thing. And so when I rebranded this time, I was like, I think I need a new logo and stuff. And so I went through a similar process, but now it's more like, hey, I make the thing and then I show my wife and she's like, yes, no, too much, too little. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm still glad that I have that person to fall back on, that support. And then, there's a guy on my channel, shout out to D Gulag. He's been a subscriber for a long, very long time. And he's always been into like weirder stuff. He's a little older than I am, but we always kind of talk about, we're always like, that movie's terrible, but we love it. So that's a common theme. And like, I recently just bought The Ripper from Vinegar Syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
with Tom Savini. It's a terrible movie and it's the most boring movie ever. Like nothing happens, but we're both just like, yeah, but there's a bunch of Tom Savini gore in it. So it's worth it. Like, and we'll just like back and forth, just like talk about the weirdest shit that you've probably never even remotely heard of. It's like, in the bowels of horror that's not good, but that's what I love about it. It's like I sometimes get introduced to like movies because we'll kind of go back and forth and he'll say a movie and I'm like, I've never heard of that movie before. And then I'll say something like, oh, I didn't even know that existed. Like
Mm-hmm.
when we were found out that there was a Midnight 2, we were like, oh, there's a Midnight 2? What? We didn't even know. Like, and so it was this interesting thing where sometimes you're like, you mention a name and somebody's like, they get excited to hear about this weird movie. And I think that's the high of it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even like I said, even though it's a smaller community, because I'm in like a niche and a niche and a niche talking about the films that I talk about. So it's exciting that there's anybody. I think that's the thing. Like, and I think that's why I didn't go that route in the beginning, because you're like, oh, I'm going to cover like Halloween and Chucky and these things. And then eventually you're like, yeah, but everybody talks about that stuff. It's not that interesting. like, yeah, Child's Play is great. I think the first one's kind of boring, but like, Child's Play 2 is great. Halloween's great. Like, so how many times do you need to say like Halloween's great? Like Friday
Mhm.
the 13th, the original is bad. Like, you know, I think I have too many takes on those movies also that I don't really like a lot of them that I probably banished off of YouTube for all
Yeah.
my takes. Hereditary's bad. Like, you know, that's why I mean it's like you don't want me talking about like major franchise movies because, you know, I might find some people that agree with me, but I think because of the type of movies that I like, it's almost a disservice to be like, of course that's what I think. Of
Mhm.
course that's what I think because I'm watching bad movies all the time. My brain is like a fried egg. I don't know what's good or bad anymore. Like, you know, there's a movie that I'm going to recommend that's not a good movie, but that's where my brain is at. That I've seen so many, even Red Letter Media. I kind of like, I see why they don't like a lot of, I think people kind of call them out a lot of times because like, well, you just think everything's bad. It's like, no, but like the type of movies, if you watch that type of movie for so long, you kind of want that bad. You want
Mhm.
the cheese, you want the bad, like you want the goofy. And when you don't get it out of a mainstream movie that's like so crisp and clean and like it's so studio driven that like you kind of miss that. So I think that's where I'm at now. That's why I like doing that. But the lows sometimes can be like you can sometimes feel alone at the same time in talking about a lot of those movies. Cause like for a recent thing, I like my midnight video did like, you know, 2,500 views. And then I did another movie the next week and it did 100. So I think it's a back and forth of like, you never really know what's going to hit and what doesn't. So it's got to kind of be just keeping yourself going and being like, just keeping talking about the weird movies. Because again, like how many people have watched Drive and Massacre from, you know, 1970? I don't know, you
Mhm.
know, but I think it's one of those things that you kind of hope that people eventually will kind of latch on and get to do them. So yeah, that's kind of the highs and the lows. Just kind of sometimes you feel alone when you get no responses and you're like, oh, does anybody care if I lost it? Like,
Yeah.
you know, nobody commented, nobody watched this video. You're like, oh, okay. You know, like I guess I'll keep going. So there can be
Yeah.
those dips sometimes where you have to kind of get yourself back on the horse and be like, no, I want to talk about it, get exciting about the next thing. So I think that's why I like having them planned out too, because I can just move on and get excited about the next movie I'm going to talk about.
Mhm. Speaking of movies, let's talk about your physical media, buddy. How big is your collection?
Okay, so I know I did my like full physical media collection like video, but that's not actually my full collection. I don't know. It's a lie. It's a sham. I think that's more of like my. I think I did cover some VHSs, but a lot of that was my collection that I had at the time with me because I was, you know, I've been in the process of I moved last year. Some of it was packed, so those were like the 800 movies that I had out at the time. So, and also like I have a lot of movies that I'm just like, I don't even care about showing these. There's a lot of DVDs that I had. I used to work at a video store, so I just bought them when they're like 20 cents, 30 cents. I've gotten rid of most of my DVD collection, but
Mhm.
I would say closer now, closer to 1,000. I think the biggest difference now is I pare a lot back. It's one of the things I've talked about that I don't need a wall. Like I know I have a wall of movies. I don't need a wall of movies. So I have kind of constrained myself to be like, hey, I've got this shelf, but the problem is now like this shelf is full and I do have a whole tub of movies. So I have about 1,000. That's down from about 1,600. At one point I had closer to
Oh, wow.
4,000. Like in the DVD era, I had closer to about 4,000. We're talking about 2007, 2008, like right around like Blu-ray. And but again, I worked at a video rental place, so I would
Mhm.
just like buy stuff secondhand. But I was just buying crap to buy stuff. It was
Mhm.
before like there was like obviously YouTube was in its infancy, so there was nobody like talking about the stuff. So when people would see my collection, they'd be like, "Oh my god!" Like I literally had those shelves at like those Atlantic shelves. I had them across my wall. I had
Wow.
so many, like, and this was like I had one that was just like TV shows on DVD, like all these DVDs, all my VHSs. I'm an avid VHS collector. I know some people don't because like, what's the point? You're not going to watch it. But again, in my field, there are some movies, one that I'm going to talk about that is only on VHS. So I
Mm.
think that's why I collect VHS. It's not a nostalgia thing. It is just
Mhm.
like I need access to some of these movies that like I can't get. Like there's a lot of stuff that's not streaming. There's a lot of this stuff that is not on DVD. It's not on Blu-ray, definitely not on 4K. So I think I've gone through a lot of my VHSs. So most of the stuff I own, unless it's just like stuff that I love, like, I mean, like, look at The Abyss. Like, we just got that. So, like, my copy of The Abyss is, you know, I needed it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, like, first time that's happened.
But like my copy of The Abyss was like, it was actually useful until just now. Like that's
Mhm.
crazy to think that my VHS of The Abyss was like actually relevant until this year. Like,
Yeah,
so I think that's kind of why I've collected them, but I do go through them. So I would say about every 6 months I go through my collection and
just curate.
I just curate and go,
Yeah.
"Hey, what's something that I bought?" And that's why I don't buy as much anymore. Like I really try to like pick and curate what I want. And so I buy for me, and then if I want to cover it, I cover it. I don't buy for YouTube anymore, which is kind of what I was doing, like I touched on before.
Mhm,
I think everybody does it at some point. They're like, "Oh, I'm going to buy these things," and they cover them. You eventually you're like,
mhm.
"Ah, that's just too much stuff." Like, I'll be honest, like my Vinegar Syndrome video I just did, like I just bought like 35 movies. Like, what am I going to do? There's so many. Like, I'm just like, when am I gonna watch all these? Like,
Yeah.
so it's just like I'm gonna have to find, but I know at some point I'll probably cover them. It'll take me 5 years to cover all of them, but I'll get there eventually. So I think now I'm like curating but those 30 movies will be replaced because I'll go through my movie collection. I'm about to move again in July, and I'll go through everything and I'll be like, what do I not want? What have I not watched in the last year? And typically, unless it's a movie that I love, if I
Mhm.
haven't watched it in the last year or it's not some collectible thing, I usually do get rid of it, especially like studio titles, just like generic studio titles. Like, do I really need to own The Firm on 4K? Do I need to own The Firm? No, I probably don't. Like, so it's
Mhm.
like typically like I'll buy it and I'll watch it and I'm like, cool, it's like $20, and then I'll like turn around and resell it and at least get most of my money back and try to turn that into other stuff. I've got a secondhand shop here that's really good. So sometimes I'll do that. I'll just go there. They get some Vinegar Syndrome stuff, some Severance stuff. They get some Arrow
Ooh.
stuff. So every 6 months I do that. I like curate my collection and so it can fit on this shelf. I'm actually gonna have another shelf when I move. So I'll actually be able to have my full collection out because I'm gonna move all my
Oh, wow.
VHSs to one cabinet, which will free
Yeah.
up a lot of this space. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with my physical media collection. A lot.
Was there a person who influenced you to become a physical media collector?
No, I think because I collected before it was a thing. Like I didn't know that there was a physical media like thing back then because I've been collecting for so long.
Mhm.
I mean, God, I was let's see, I started collecting probably when I was in high school.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I know my mom, like I wouldn't say my mom is like that person, but we just had a lot of movies because, like I said, my mom really loves movies. She still, even though she doesn't like horror, my mom loves movies.
Mhm.
So I think we bought like every Disney movie on VHS. Anytime like a VHS came out, we were buying it because we were watching them.
Mhm.
So I think that's what it was. Is I was just kind of around it a lot. I just knew we always like we had like a sunroom on our house where we'd like watch TV and stuff. I mean, of course, the TV was this big, but
Mhm.
it could fit in this screen. But we just had VHSs. We used to have like tubs of them. They weren't even like because there weren't shelves back then specifically made for physical media. It's like we were using like old bookcases and then like these like plastic Rubbermaid totes that just had VHSs in them that we like dig through. So I mean, I think that was it. It's just like I always loved movies. So the fact that I was buying them just kind of made sense. And then by year like 3 of working at the video store I worked at, like it made sense. But I think again, I grew up renting movies, which
Mhm.
kids now don't. So like I used to go every weekend with my grandfather and go to Blockbuster and we pick out stuff. I love the actual physical thing of owning something. I'm
Mhm.
not like that with video games anymore. I used to kind of have that both thing with video games where I'd like wanted to own a lot of stuff. I'm completely digital with video games because I own too many. So like I gotta have one or the other. It's either movies or video games. I don't need both. So I love VHSs. I just think I don't necessarily have nostalgia for like the format, but I think I
Mhm.
like the art of VHSs. So
Yeah,
I'm
if
a big
people
art person. I like
can
the artwork of
notice,
it.
you got some
I have a ton of
displayed.
them back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think
Yeah.
I even commented on that Johnny
Right. There. Where's
Mnemonic.
he at? There he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's yeah.
Next to Lawnmower 2.
Yeah. Oh, really? I
Lawnmower.
could
Yeah, that's what that is.
okay. Okay, gotcha.
And it's
Uh,
actually a, like, distributor copy. It's not even the actual retail one. It's one that was, like, sent to be shown to people to buy the VHS.
oh, whoa.
Yeah, so it's
That's
a
pretty
cooler
damn tight.
VHS, yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. Uh, um, well, since we're talking about your collection,
Mhm.
let's just talk about it. What is your top 5 movies or pieces in your collection?
Okay. So I picked 6. I picked one extra one. So I'm gonna give like an extra one. But so these some of these are recent. So I mean they're some of my favorite stuff. But again, like I kind of want to show off stuff that maybe you can actually buy too. That's one of the things. Like everybody's gonna say the Friday the 13th collection, and I know that it's good, but it's not one of my favorite things. Like I know the Scream Factory was like, yeah, that Friday the 13th collection. It is a masterclass in how to do a franchise like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not by far my favorite thing. Like Friday the 13th is not my favorite, so I like the aspect of all those movies. But um, the first one is going to be these are no order of like the best to worst, but the Error Video little set. I know they make a cheaper version of this. It's garbage. Don't buy it. If you can find it, this is the one to buy because it is just it's incredible. I also love all of these movies. So I think it was like when this was coming out, it immediately was like, of course I want Robot Jocks on Blu-ray. Of course I want Dolls. Like, of course I want these movies. So it's just a rad idea to kind of have this video store format. And I think it's just really cool. And I wish Arrow would do more of these box sets.
Yeah, no
If
kidding.
every year we got one of these, that
Oh,
would be awesome.
mm-hmm.
Empire of Screams 2, like whatever it is, you know. I like the Paramount one, the Paramount Scares one. I think it's okay. But so I'm liking that some of the studios are getting involved in like bringing their catalog horror. Warner should probably do one because they have a ton of horror movies. But I'm excited that they're doing that stuff. But I wish Arrow would do more of that stuff. Like bring some of their like older, like lesser known horror movies and put them in a thing. Even because I like it because it's like not just horror. It's like it's some action stuff. It's all a mixture of different genres of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Some fantasy stuff. So I like the
Mm-hmm.
bundle of like the 5 movies being like, hey, these are all from different genres and they're all pretty cool. And you may never have heard of them, but it's a cool way to kind of get everybody to like kind of buy into some stuff that's maybe a little lesser known. So I really like that one. The one I added is my Hellraiser one because I was like, man, I love this thing so much. Like I won't show all of these off in like depth, but like I really like this set, and it was just one of those things that I really like Hellraiser, and I was like, man, this set is beautiful. It's beautiful. It's worth every penny. I know this set's sold out now, but I mean I'm sure you can get it off eBay. But like it was a great set, and I'm super happy that I picked it up because I almost didn't. It was one of those that I was like out on the fence about because I own like multiple copies of Hellraiser. And so I was like, no, but I need to get it. I need to get it. I also love the Psycho one too. The Psycho one is awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
all right. So the next one is a super recent one, and that's my Godzilla one.
Oh, I know, man.
This thing's badass. Like this thing, I have a video on my channel if you guys want to see like super in depth, but like this thing is incredible. Like it's just so cool. I'm glad people are finally able to watch this if they missed it because it's on Netflix and stuff, but um I hope we get something like this. I hope we do. I'm afraid we're not going to, and that's why I bought it. Because
Mm,
like I don't think we'll get this. And worst case scenario, what's going to happen is if we get an American 4K in the US, I'm just going to switch to 4K, and I'm
mhm.
just going to put it in here, and then I'll keep that case and put the Japanese version in there because obviously I'm not going to watch it. But um, this thing's awesome. Like I immediately, as soon as I saw it, was like, I have to have that. I know there's a steelbook version, but the steelbook looked fine. I just think, sometimes when steelbooks are in box sets, I
Mhm.
don't buy them as often. Arrow does a lot of that where they do like the steelbooks inside of the cases, and that's cool. But like the whole point of having a steelbook is to showcase the steelbook. So shoving a steelbook into a box set is weird for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll just take the steelbook out and put it on the shelf. Um, the next thing is something that we recently talked about is Ghost Watch. So I know we talked about this recently, but I wanted to get this and show this up. It's from 101. They don't do a lot of stuff, but when they do, it's pretty cool. So I really like this thing. It's a mockumentary. I know a lot of times people thought it was like Rio back then, but it's great. If you haven't seen this, and this is a solid thing, and this wasn't that expensive either. That's the funny thing about this. I think that when this came out, it was like $24. It's crazy that it
Oh,
was
wow.
so cheap. It wasn't like something that was like $50, $60, which is crazy. A lot of their stuff is not expensive. It was kind of like old Lionsgate steelbooks when they were $22 and not
Mhm.
40. Um, the next thing is my Vinegar Syndrome Lost Picture Show. I think this is awesome. This is probably one of the best things, not necessarily movie wise, but this is probably one of the best like things Vinegar Syndrome's ever made.
Hmm.
It just is super cool. Again, I have like a full detailed video too of this, but this thing just opens up. It's super rad. It's got a bunch of like movies that were almost lost to time. So they're like not all in like amazing quality. This isn't some like 4K showcase, but just a lot of weird movies and just a lot of cool stuff. And that's why I like Vinegar Syndrome so much is there's just a lot of like weird stuff. There's, a lot of exploitation stuff. There's a lot of 70s stuff. And this was one of those things that kind of melded kind of everything that they do kind of into one box set.
Hmm.
But I think it's awesome.
Yeah, you are
Um,
the person who basically inspired me, who got me to get that.
oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
at their
awesome.
recent sale.
And the last thing, because I had 6, is this thing. So this is
Oh
the
yeah, I
Universal
forgot.
Monsters limited edition, like big giant book. I can't even show the whole thing, but again, it's just a bunch of art from all these movies. Kind of show it has all the 4Ks that have come out for the Universal Monsters.
Hmm.
It's limited edition to like 5,000, I think. But this thing is awesome. It's just like a giant book. Like, so it's pretty cool. I know it's weird. It's not for everybody. It's not for every collector because it's of space. But I love those movies. So for me, it was like I actually own the steel books as well for all
Oh, okay.
these, which are all Jeff Ross art. So I really like that stuff. So I love the Universal Monsters. I love 50s horror. So
Hmm.
I was super excited to kind of get that and kind of house all of them. I have the bundles too, so I've bought these movies like 3 times. I don't know. Every time they bid out Universal Monsters, I'm like, I'll buy that. 'Cause I got the
All of
DVDs, I got the
triple
Blu-rays
dip.
with the steel books. Yeah, then I got when they came out with the 4K sets, I bought both of those, and then I bought this thing. I'm like, my God, like, Universal Monsters, man, they're great.
Nice. Um, I want to say you did a video for that, right?
Yes, I
I could
did.
have sworn
Yep.
you. Okay,
I
I
tried
was
to
like,
pick things that I like. If people wanted to see, I have done them. So Empire of Screens, I have a video on Godzilla, the Universal Monster thing, Hellraiser. I think I have a video on all these actually. Now that I'm looking at, yes, I have a video on all these.
nice.
Ghostwatch, I think, is more of like I think I talk about that the movie side, but I do have videos for all of those. So if you guys are interested, they're on the channel. They'll be under my 4K playlist. So, but yes, I have videos for all of those. So
Yeah, and
look
just
at that promotion. Look at that.
yeah,
Just
there you go.
synergy, I didn't even do it on purpose, but I just happened to have videos on all those things. Surprisingly, I love a thing. I made a video about it. It's crazy.
Um, so since you just talked about it, might as well. What is your top 5 steel books?
Oh,
You
okay.
said you
Yeah. We wanted to
yeah,
talk about
might
this.
as well.
I brought this topic to the table because we
Yeah.
had talked about steelbooks and everybody talks about steelbooks. And it's like, I want to talk about steelbooks because I have a ton of them. So I've saved the best one for last. So I'm going to save that one for last. But um,
Mm,
The Wicker Man, I love this steelbook so much. And I love this movie. So this is, a lot of these I like love the movies for them. But I think this is great. The big set is awesome too. I know you've got the big
mhm.
set for that. I really like the steelbook. I didn't go with the big set because I don't know, like the steelbook is so great. I really love the steelbook. The next one is House of a Thousand Corpses.
Okay.
I think this steelbook is incredible. Like it's so cool. I have the big 20th anniversary box set as well. I have a video for this, I think, too. Then a lesser known one, it's not like that, but I really love this steelbook is the Driller
Oh,
Killer
actually, okay.
from
Yeah.
Arrow. I think this is just so like it's pretty subtle, but I really just like this movie is kind of what I do. I wanted to bring some weird movie that I had a steelbook for. So I really like this thing. It's just very like just like, hey, there's a guy getting drilled on your thing. The next one is more recent, but I love this Killer Clowns steelbook. I think this is the best Scream Factory thing. Pumpkinhead's also great. So it was a kind of a toss up between the two.
Mhm,
But I think this, like as a package, I think is great. Like I think the 4K is incredible.
mhm.
The movie's great, and I think the steelbook is fantastic. The next one is not horror. I tried to pick something that wasn't horror,
Nice.
but this is my Blade Runner 2049 one.
Mhm.
I love this movie. I think it's great, and so I really love the steelbook too. I know this thing's like $100 and something now, which is crazy. Like
Oh, wow.
this steelbook is so expensive. This is just
Yeah.
it's funny enough. Like I just randomly found this at a Best Buy. It was like the year it came out, but it had been like shoved behind stuff, and I just randomly found it and then bought it. And then of course years later, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, it's gone. Like, so some of the steelbooks I own, I've kept just because of that. Like, I've got a ton more, but those are ones that I really liked. I really like my Deadpool one. I've got the Deadpool one that has like all the stickers and patches and stuff like that one. I like that one. I have the John Wick one with like the first two movies in it, which is a cool steelbook. I've got every John Wick steelbook that's out there. I've got the big, like
Nice.
big Bible set, which is pretty cool. And let's have the best one for last because I know this is for fun.
Oh, a
This is
steel book of Rawhead
Rawhead Rex. Yeah.
What?
I'm gonna bring you on, and we're gonna do a video about Rawhead
Oh
Rex, 'cause
man,
I
you're
know you love
torturing
it
me.
so much. But the steelbook is great. It's still sealed. Like, this is how much pristine, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are ones that I like just went through. I'm sure some people are like, oh, there's better ones, there's worse ones. I have like 300 steelbooks, so like going through them all is like there's a ton of them. But again, I picked some that are like readily available that you can get. Some of the other ones are, you know, you can go eBay, but those are
Nice.
movies that I liked, and those are some steelbooks that I liked. So
Heck yeah. Beautiful, man. Even the Rawhead Rex.
that Kino steelbook is still good. Like, it's still great.
Touched upon it earlier with my intro that you're sponsored by Vinegar Syndrome. So next question is, what's your favorite boutique label, and what are your 5 favorite movies from their label?
Oh God. Oh man. This is tough. I'm gonna have to look. Vinegar Syndrome is by far my favorite. You know, no South. Now I gotta look. Now you put me on the spot. Roadhouse is great. That's an awesome one from there. Fatal Games is also great. From Beyond is fantastic. I'm going to cover From Beyond pretty soon. Taming the T-Rex is one of my favorite bad movies, so I'm going to say that. And then I'll say Miami Connection is also another one that's great. And then I'll say Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I think that set is awesome.
Nice. Heck yeah, man. Love it.
So yeah, those are ones off my head, and that's not even all of them. That's just some of them. So I don't even have the new ones added in, and I have most of my Vinegar Syndrome collections at the bottom. This is for aesthetics, just so people know. It's like, oh, he's got his collection. Yeah, this is just for aesthetic purposes. Like, it's hard to be like, yeah, I need a collection, but then I also need to like make it somewhat presentable for YouTube. So I have a background. So like, some of my collection is just like broken up and like down at the bottom and you can't see it, or it's in a tub. So
yeah. What are your thoughts of physical media collecting and its importance in 2024?
So I think for me, like I said, it's that double edge where it's like I'm collecting for maybe a very different reason. I do like having physical media, but by nature, sometimes of the movies that I want to cover, I'm like, oh man, this thing hasn't been out. It's only been on a VHS. So I think it's important to, as like an archival process, to save a lot of these movies, which is why I really like Vinegar Syndrome, which is why I like Severin. Sometimes Severin doesn't do movies that I particularly care about. I think that's the other thing. I think my style of the movies that I like, Vinegar Syndrome just does more of that. So I don't even think it's like, I think one label is better than the other. I think Severin does a lot of great work. I'm super excited to get Kathy's Curse with the little light up eyes that we got. That thing's been delayed forever. Maybe we'll get it at some point. But I think they do a lot of good work. So I think it's just sometimes it's just the movies that they're picking is more like I'm just on the vibe of like the people that work at Vinegar Syndrome. Like they're just picking movies that like I'm really into or I saw as a kid. And so I think that's why I like them so much. And their packaging is incredible. Like, I mean, everybody knows that. So that's another thing. I feel like if I'm spending $30 to $40, I'm getting my money's worth. Whereas like sometimes with Severin, you're spending $40 and you're not even getting a slipcover. So, and same with Scream Factory. So I think a lot of times it's more like when I'm spending money with Vinegar Syndrome, I feel like my money is being well spent. Like, because the only time you're not going to get a slipcover is if it's going out of print or the slipcover is sold out. They don't make anything without them. Which is what I think is great. It's from a collector standpoint, I think it's nice because you can have a uniform collection. Now they do make 9 different box sizes which is annoying. You know,
Mm.
every different little sub label has a different thing. So you've got your hard shells, and you got your bigger hard shells, and you've got your double shells, and you've got your VSUs, your VSAs, the VSLs. Like there's so many different lines that they have that sometimes it's like, how do I organize these? Do I do it by number? Do I do it by alphabet? Do I do it by the lines? Like, so my OCD is like, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of them. Like right now, most of those are just the same size. There's a couple other like bigger box sets, but when I move, I'm going to probably actually put them by the line. So that way they're all together. So they're all
There you go.
even.
Yep.
But then it's like the big boxes, you're like, okay, so I just have to set these big boxes on their own in alphabetical order, I guess. So that's the anal retentive in this me. I'm like, I don't know how to do it, but I think it's important though, because I think it's something that like viewing these movies in this way, the reverence for them a lot of times. We're not even talking like studio stuff, because sometimes that stuff can be garbage, and sometimes you're just like, you just put out Footloose because it's the anniversary of Footloose, and there's sometimes not a lot of time. Sometimes there's movies that are just coming out because it hit a milestone.
Mhm.
Whereas I think Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, a lot of them, they're putting out those movies because they love those movies. Like obviously they think they're going to make money, so they've got to have that aspect of like, hey, we need to make money, so we're going to put out some heavy hitters. Vinegar Syndrome does the same thing. Like they put out Roadhouse because it's Roadhouse. They put out like, they're still going to get bigger titles sometimes. Even Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. There's a reasons why they go after like these bigger ones. And so I think that's what's cool about them. But again, I think it's important because I think it is helping there's a lot of movies that aren't streaming. There's a lot of like really good movies that aren't streaming. And I think people now are just getting shoveled movies. I think that's the thing. It was like back in the day when we were kids, we got to pick stuff out. We got to go and visually see, and you didn't have 1,000 options. You didn't get stuff that was buried. You were just like, here, you're purely basing it on like reading the back of the box and just, picking it up and being like, this looks kind of cool. But there really wasn't there was no loss a lot of times. It's a Friday night. I'm a kid. I'm just going to watch this movie. Whereas I think now I think they just sit and scroll. I think that's most people's lives now. Anyway, they scroll on Twitter, they scroll on Instagram, they scroll TikTok, and they scroll on Netflix. But they're not actually watching anything. Nobody's picking anything. And they're just like, and then obviously it's all algorithm. So it's just like, hey, you watched Bridgerton, so here's another British thing that you can watch. But I think unless you're spending the time to like actually curate what you're watching, you just end up watching stuff that's kind of generic and boring and kind of the same. Like if you go on Netflix, there's not a lot of interesting things there. There's going to be some new stuff. There's going to be some solid like thrillers sometimes, but you miss so many things that I think that's why I think I've tried to balance the two also. Sometimes even if I don't cover a movie, like showing the physical media of that thing is not just to show off the thing that, hey, I bought this. It's more like, hey, do you even know this movie exists? And we're going to touch on some when I kind of do my recommendations, but like there's some movies that you may not even one know exist, and two that actually have a 4K, which is crazy to me. So I think it's very important. I will say one thing about physical media. I know people get up in arms about 4Ks. I do not give a shit if it's on 4K. I know sometimes we talk about that. I think some people are like, where's the 4K? Where's the 4K? It's like, dude, it's only been on VHS. It's been stuck on VHS for 30 years. Does it really matter if it's on 4K? But I think also sometimes too, people miss the principle of how much it costs to make these movies and like to bring them and the licensing and stuff like that. So yeah, sometimes it's like, it got a 4K scan, but it doesn't have a 4K disc because they're expensive. Like, and there's a lot more money that goes into like buying 100+ gig disc, or 100 gig disc to put this movie on. And sometimes it's unneeded. Sometimes like it's not going to benefit from being on the format. Like if it's an old VHS, it may not, depending on how it's shot. Like it may not benefit from, if it's not shot on film, it's not going to benefit. Like 35 millimeters is really what benefits from being on 4K. Some like terrible, like digitally shot video from the 90s is not going to look great most of the time on 4K. So but you got to be smart too. You got to be smart. And like when stuff's coming out, does you really want it? Do you really want a 4K? And so I know like some people are like, well, you got to buy the Blu-ray to buy the 4K. And you're like, well, I don't have to. I can wait. And also like, sometimes I don't care. I do think it's annoying sometimes when the studios are big enough recently, especially like the 20th Century Fox stuff. I don't understand the concept of that because it's a new movie. Like we're not talking about old movies. I don't understand new movies not getting a 4K a lot of times because what's the difference to press that disc? I'm not saying you have to make a ton of them. You can make a limited amount of those discs, But like, especially like The First Omen, like all these horror movies that are coming out and we're not getting them, but then we are getting them from other labels. So it's the thing, it's like people know they're going to sell. It's just the companies that have the rights are just not willing to make them. Disney is terrible at that. Like they will not make 4Ks. Like they just don't. And even now that they're partnered with Sony, like they're still not doing it. Like why are these horror movies not getting 4Ks? Sometimes I get it, but like if they were financially successful, it's like it's going to come out. But then you got to buy a Blu-ray to then spend more money.
Yeah, I touched upon it in one of my videos. Is that how it kind of just pisses me off a little bit, where the what you just said, the First Omen's getting a Blu-ray. However, on streaming, like on the Apple Store, you can get it on 4K. So
yeah, it's just annoying, and I get the concept behind it. I think sometimes it's frustrating because I think some people don't get the business logistics behind it. I do. There is one YouTuber, I'm not gonna call him out. I'm not gonna be a dick, but like there's one YouTuber who just hounds that home all the time, and it's infuriating. I'm like, I get it. But all they say is like, hey, you've got to buy the Blu-ray so you can get the 4K. And it's like, bro, not everybody's out here and has the money to buy both of these. I just think it's unrealistic to ask people to spend $20, $25 and then in 6 months turn around and spend $30. I don't care what the logistics of the business are, especially in the state that most of the country's in. That is unrealistic to ask somebody to spend $50 on a movie. That is a studio title. I'm not spending $50 on The First Omen. It's just not going to happen. There is no special packaging. It's just a generic standard Blu-ray or 4K. So I think that's unrealistic. So I get it, but I just honestly don't think Disney and those companies care. That's the other problem. They're just pitting it out because they know they're going to get crap if they don't put it out on physical media, because Disney's been notorious for that forever. This is not a 4K thing. This is a VHS thing where they vault everything. And then they bring it out as a special edition. They can do that shit now, and they don't. Like, think about if Disney put everything they owned, like, on a Blu-ray disc or on a 4K. Like, they're just leaving money a lot of times. It's crazy that they have like all these movies in a vault and they don't put any of them out. Especially when they bought 20th Century. Now they're partnering to be like, hey, we couldn't even be bothered to make these movies anymore. We're just gonna give them to Sony to put out. And it's still like, you're like, okay. And now I don't think like The First Omen is not indicative of that, because obviously it's just a new partnership. And some people are like, oh, what's happening? I'm like, that stuff's been in the works forever. Like these discs, like that partnership is suddenly not going to unfurl in a month. Like it's going to take time for Sony to ramp up distribution for these specific titles. So maybe in a year we'll see the fruits of that labor of like them combining and like getting stuff. But it's like The First Omen, all these movies were already slated to be on the formats they're on. They still have to press all this stuff takes time. But yeah, sometimes it's annoying when you're just like, I know if I buy this, I'm gonna buy it again. We're not even talking about 4K like releases to steelbooks even, because they've been doing that a lot lately. Where it's like, hey, you're gonna buy this 4K, and then in a year you're gonna get a steelbook. Screen Factory is notorious for that too, where it's like They Live came out, and then They Live Steelbook came out, and they're always better. That's the other problem. It's just like, it's not just about the movie, but the collector in us that wants something cool. It's like, no, that's so much better. Like The Evil Dead, we just talked about that. Like The Evil Dead's coming out and the Steelbook's coming out, and it's so much better than the plain art that got no slipcover. So of course I want that. So I think that's the state of physical media is in a weird spot. I think we have a lot, so I'm not going to complain. I think my problems are more on the big studio side. Which granted, a lot of those movies I don't care about anyway, so I don't focus my collection on studio titles. So I think it's another thing that's changed. It's like, I'm just like, whatever, I'll wait. And if enough people don't buy the Blu-ray, then guess what? I'm just not going to own that movie. Like that's the thing. Like if The First Omen doesn't come out, like in a year, if it doesn't come out on 4K, then yeah, I'll buy it. It's one of those things. But also most modern horror, I don't think is worth buying. So it's one of those things that like, The First Omen's good, yeah, but do I care if I own it? Probably not. It's like, am I going to revisit it? Probably not. There's a lot of like modern horror that I think is good, but I think it's because the bar is so low. I think the bar is very low with horror. Like, so.
So that is a great segue, my friend. I'll start off with some positives, and then we'll get into because I always joke how I'm Ebert and you're Siskel
Yes.
within our horror takes. So, um, top 5 obscure or unknown horror movies. What are your
Okay.
top 5?
So I picked some out because I picked some that I actually owned. So I wasn't just like, telling you things. So some of these, I would say all of these you can buy, other than one is going to be a little weirder to buy. Two, but all the other ones you can probably go to the sites and buy these movies. So they're not ones that are like super weird, but I did want to touch on them. So I think I actually have 7. I'm breaking your rule of 5 because that's just what I do. The other 2 are just kind of honorable mentions of stuff that I think is just interesting. One of them I just recently got, and that is Midnight 2. We were just talking about this.
Mm.
So I just covered John Russo, who is the writer of Night of the Living Dead, did Midnight, and then which is like some backwoods thing. It's very goofy and very funny. But I just covered on channel. But I actually found out there was a sequel. This movie is only on DVD. It's weird. It's very expensive. This thing was $35
For
on
a
eBay.
DVD?
For a DVD. This is the only release of this movie. It's a very small company that made this. So who put out Severin put out Midnight, the first one, on Blu-ray, which is what I watched. So, but I looked everywhere for this, and it was one of those things. It's not even really like you can't find it online. It may be some weird, obscure place online, but I couldn't find a rip of it even. So it was one of those things that it's like weird that the first one is like, I think a lot more people know about it than I thought, but this second one is weird. So I watched it recently. I'm going to cover it, but it is a very like departured movie from the first one. It is like the first one is this like, it's also called like the Backwoods Massacre. And it's just very just like, hey, these kids are going to go in the woods. They're going to come across some like redneck killers. And that's the movie.
Mm-hmm.
This one is like one of the one surviving member of that survives. And it's about him killing these women and like videotaping it. And so it's like, that's why I say it's like very much a nature of like in a violent nature. Cause it is following, it's like POV him. Serial killing and like videotaping these things. So like the only connection is that he survived this thing and he was already a killer, but now it's like it's a different actor and stuff like that. But it is like following these things, but he's making all these tapes. It's very weird and interesting. So but that's the first one. The next honorable mention is going to be Headhunter. So this is a very bad movie, but I love it. But it's a great movie. It's a great movie. So it's basically these things like they summon this headhunter and he comes and just chops off heads. That's what he does. He's a headhunter. It's a very like old movie, but I really love it. And the art I think is just great. I think it's just great art. The practical effects on the dude are terrible. Like he's in the movie maybe like 3 times. So they're like, hey, here's our budget with the headhunter. He's just gonna pop up 3 times and chop some heads off and leave. And it's very funny. But so there's that one. All right. So then I'm gonna talk about Prey, which I'm gonna be covering this soon, which is why I got it. But it's a very British movie. So it's a British movie. It's a little slower, but it's not boring. I would say there's a difference between being slow and being dull. It's very intriguing. So it's about this fox-like alien who comes to the planet and crashes. And he comes upon this like lesbian couple that is like in the middle of the woods living in this like mansion. And they think he's just kind of lost and disheveled and doesn't know where he's at, but he's actually like this alien and he doesn't know what anything is. So there's like a scene where he's like messing around with this bird for like 20 minutes and you can just see he's like fascinated by this bird in a cage, but all he wants to do is eat the bird in the cage. So it's just weird movie, but it's just strange because he's like this animal alien and has to kind of like coexist with these 2 ladies for a time. And then they start to get close to him, but one of them suspects the other one, but the other lady is like very controlling. And there's some stuff you find about her that's very interesting. So it's a very wild movie. And then like the last like 15 minutes, like ramp up to like a 10. And it's this movie that has been like, but it's very well shot. It's a gorgeous movie for being from the 70s. It is a gorgeous movie. And then Vinegar Syndrome did a great transfer for it, but it's very well shot. It's very well acted for even being like the type of movie it is. It's very well acted. There's only 3 people in the movie. So it's small pace, 1 location, my favorite type of movie. I like a small cast, 1 location. You have to do a lot more with it. You gotta carry stuff. You can't just be like, look at all these locations we got. And there's not a lot of killing in the movie, so it's not that type of movie. It's more of like this like psychological thriller thing where it's like, but he's an alien also. So very interesting. The next one is Asylum. This is a Severin release. So this is like an anthology piece. Peter Cushing's in it. And it's kind of based in this asylum in the beginning. And they're talking to a guy. I don't want to give too much away, but it kind of cuts through all these stories. But the interstitial is like them in an asylum. So it's pretty good. Who else is in it? Yeah. Peter Cushing's in it. He's great in that one. All right. The next one is more recent. And that is Spider Labyrinth, which recently just came out on 4K from Severin. This is a wild movie. So this is the first time this movie is like ever been released outside of its like initial release. So it's this movie. The other crazy thing is this thing has 4 hours of special features. It is ridiculous that this movie has so many special features. It is like a horror gem, man. Like I did not know what this movie, I'd heard about it before, but I'd never seen it, obviously, because it's really hard to come by, but it is wild. It is a wild, like Italian horror movie. And so, but not in the same vein as like a Giallo or something like that. It's got like instances of all that, but it is like far more than what it seems. But it is really wild. It's kind of this like sex horror, like all mixed together Italian, type of movie, but it is great. And you can still get that one. That one recently came out. I think that came out a couple months ago. Next one is The Baby.
Haven't heard of
which is a weird movie. Ironically enough, I had this and I was actually going to cover it, and then Red Letter Media covered it like 2 weeks later. Like I was like, oh my God, they're covering The Baby. So it is a wild movie. So there is a guy who they treat as a baby, and like there's the mother and the father's gone, and there's 2 sisters. And then there's a lady who is going to come, and she's like a type of therapist that works with like adults that have, disabilities or whatever. You kind of are kind of seemingly what's going on with like learning disabilities. So she comes in and starts to take care of this stuff. And the turn in this movie, my God, what the actual end of this movie is bananas. Like you do not see it coming. There's some weird like sister brother stuff going on that they imply that they are like doing things with this man baby. Like it is wild. It is a wild movie, but the end is banana. Like it's so bananas that when they covered it, they didn't even talk about the ending, which they always talk about ending. They're like, no, you have to watch it. It is one of those movies that like you may find it boring. There's some weird things where they just imply a lot of stuff. Like, oh, there's this baby. That sister's going to have sex with that baby man. Oh God. And then why that man is a baby is also another intriguing fact, because it's not something he's born with. It's something like way more sinister than that. So, and then the ending is wild. Like when it's like literally like 4 minutes and that's the ending. And like, it changes the entire movie. It's just one of those endings where it's like this weird movie that is weird across the board. In the last 4 or 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God, that's what this is about. That's crazy. Like, so everybody should watch The Baby. I think you can stream The Baby. Like you can find it. It's not, if you want to buy the Arrow release, but like Frank, you need to watch The Baby. That is your homework. Watch The Baby. And then you need to message me when you watch the end because it's wild. All right. Then the next one I have is, I'm trying to think who's in this. Oh yeah. Is Paganini Horror. This is my last one. This is one of those that like when you would see this cover on a VHS, you'd be like, oh, that looks awesome. Paganini, famous violinist. This is about Donald Pleasence is in this movie. So, which is pretty rad. He's in it for a little bit, but this is the coolest part about it is this cover. It is a very like boring movie, but it is ridiculous. Like, and so it's just one of those that's like very fun, very 80s. Very poorly acted, but it's just a fun movie. Like Donald Pleasence, even though he's in it for like 3 scenes, is like chewing through the scenes and like what is happening in this movie. A lot of these movies from this era are like very big conceptually, but they don't have the budget to pull off what they're doing. So they're a band and they're like, hey, we found some Paganini music that has never been released before. And it's that trap. It's almost like a devil's advocate thing where they're like, Pacino's like, look, this is what you can do and you can have all of this. I'm going to show. So that's basically what it is. It's like they find this Paganini music, which Donald Pleasence gives to them, and then they start using it, and then it has consequences.
Hmm.
But it's very cool conceptually and the idea is pretty cool, but then like execution is so poor, but it's
Yeah.
so fun. Like, it's so fun. It's such a fun movie. That's what I love about bad movies. They're just fun. So like it's a good bad, not just a bad bad. So
Yeah.
those are my picks. So those, hopefully you guys will enjoy those. If you've seen those movies, comment below what's your favorite. Have you seen
Yeah.
The Baby? Thumbs up. Hashtag The Baby.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
So a couple more questions. Uh, One is, so you brought up all these unique horror movies. Is there a horror movie that you refuse to watch?
I mean, not like, I don't think like in principle, I'm like, oh, I'll never watch that. There are movies that I don't like that I won't watch, but I don't think there's anything that I like just won't watch. I mean, there's a style of horror that I don't like, like I'm really not into like hostels and stuff like that. That is just like that torture prone era of stuff. I like gore, but in a bad sense.
Mhm.
Like I don't care about Saw, like I don't care about, and like that stuff doesn't do anything for me. I like silly gore. I like again, like some of these movies are like super gory, but it's like in a fun way. It's like, oh, this is really low budget. It's like the gore is fun, but no, I don't need anything that's like hyper realistic, like gore wise. So I wouldn't say we like refuse to watch that stuff. I think the only movie I wouldn't watch again is probably like Martyrs,
Mm.
which is a French movie.
Mhm, mhm.
It's a very tough movie to watch. It is one of those that has a turn in it where it's like, oh, these people do this thing to get like some type of revenge, but then it goes way farther than that. And so I
Much
think
further.
that it's a very tough movie to watch because it is not a fun movie to watch.
Mhm,
It's a very rough movie. And like it's one of those I don't even recommend people watch that movie. It's a movie that I think like if you want to watch it, it's not one of those things where God, it's super scary or it's super violent and gory. It's just like the subject matter. It's not for everybody. So I think it's one of those movies that it's like, if you're not all there, or if you find some of that stuff. Like if you think House on the Left is like rough, then this movie is like 10 times that. Like it's just, so there's stuff like that, which I mean, I just don't gravitate to, but I don't think
mhm,
there's anything that I would like refuse to watch. Like as far as like stuff doesn't really scare me. So as far as like the horror part, which is weird that I think that's why I like horror so much, because it doesn't really do anything for me. But when I
mhm,
find a movie that's like unsettles me, I think that would be a better question for me. And I don't know the answer to it. Is like, is there a movie that like unsettles me or
mhm,
like, um, but I don't know. I think I'm not going to say that The Strangers is scary. I'm not going to go that far because I think people like debate that a lot. I don't think the original Strangers is scary. I think it can be unsettling though. I think it's more unsettling, especially when you see the new one and how bad taking the same movie and making it again can be.
mhm,
It is like it loses that. The aspect of The Strangers that is creepy is that shit is random. And these people, the answer in that movie is great, where it's just like, hey, why are you here? Because you were here. That's why we're killing you, because you were just here.
mhm,
It could have been anybody else. So I think, especially as an adult, like I think that is like I watch that movie as an adult. So as a kid, you don't think about it. You're like, whatever, nobody's breaking in my house and killing me. But as an adult, you're like, man, that's a really real. I mean, you've got kids. It's one of those things that it can be a really scary thing
mhm,
to just be like, hey, we're just chilling. And there's also that movie alludes to a lot of the tension that's happening before that with
mhm,
the couple.
mhm,
And so there's a lot of tension going into that movie. And you're just like, oh, they're not even like on the same page. They've gone through all this stuff. They don't even talk about it. And then on top of that, their night just gets ruined by these people.
mhm,
So it kind of brings them back together. And then, she's kind of left alone. But I think that is more, I like movies that are like that are just kind of like unsettling. So,
mhm.
but I don't think there's anything I would refuse to watch though. No. So,
So, last horror question is, you briefly touched upon it just a second ago. What is your current state of the horror genre?
oh man. Okay. We're going to go back a few years to when I started my channel. So the reason I kind of came back to horror, it's not that I've ever left horror, but I left kind of modern horror for a while. So I watched X when everybody was talking about, oh man, this is so great. It's, amazing. It's horror's back. Like Ty West did really good. I know I'm going to get some shit for this. I don't really like X that much. I think it's fine, but it is very reminiscent of the movies that came prior. It is very much an homage to that type of movie. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I've been watching stuff like that my entire life. So doing a good 70s movie is what that movie is. Like, Pearl is very well. The thing is, I think you take Mia Goth out of those movies, and I don't think they work. I'm not even like the biggest fan of Mia Goth, but like Pearl without Mia Goth doesn't work. It's kind of a boring movie. Like there's a lot of cool kills in it, but if you don't have that centered of like this incredible acting in this movie, it's just like, I think Maxine looks probably the best out of them because I think it's going to be more interesting. Like there's going to be some more characters. It's not just going to be her or these kids just in like, I thought it was an interesting thing with Pearl being old. And like, I thought that was cool. But that kind of brought me back. So that was one of those things. But then that year, like we had some solid movies then, but I think it's bad now. I know it's weird, but it's like, I think we have like one a year and everybody's like, it's saved. It's like, oh, we did it. There was one decent horror movie. But I mean, last year was awful. I couldn't even tell you a horror movie that came out last year that I liked. Couldn't even tell you. I'm sure there is one, but the fact that I can't remember what even came out last year. What do we get? Halloween Kills came out last year. That's what came out. That's like the biggest thing I can remember that like came out.
Halloween Kills?
Was that? Oh no, sorry. Halloween Ends. Was that last year or the year before that?
No, that was the year before.
Oh my God, look at that. So that's how long it's been since I've covered like new horror movies. God, has it been like a year and a half? Anyway, so yeah, it's like, so I don't know. There was a while like the time that I was doing like new ones, it's like we had Hellraiser, we had like Infinity Pool, we had Halloween Ends. There was a lot of stuff coming out then. And I don't know. I think because some of it has gone more that like A24 route. So I think a lot of the stuff that gets talked about is that stuff. But I don't think we have a lot of fun horror anymore, which I think is my biggest problem with it. I think everything is so self-serious in horror now that even Scream is kind of like that. Like Scream 6 is bad. I know we've talked about that because it's not fun. Scream was always fun. And so I think all of these horror movies now, they have to do, like Blumhouse, it's like just garbage being, thrown out. They're like, there's this one idea and it's in the trailer. And then the rest of the movie is just boring. Like it's just, there's so many boring horror movies, which is crazy to me. Like Night Swim, boring. That Imaginary movie, boring. There's just so many things. I was like, how do you make this movie about this thing that's killing things so boring? It's just like, I just don't understand. It's like, we've had a string of just like boring movies. Like, I know you kind of liked In a Violent Nature, but that movie's boring. It's just like, how do you make a movie where you're in the POV of a serial killer? Boring. I don't understand. Like, it's just like, so I don't know. I don't know. Like there hasn't really been, I think I don't go out anymore. I think that's the biggest thing I could say is that like, I think there was actively a time when I was like going out to the movie theater. I still go to the movie theater. I still watch movies, but I don't, there's many that I'm like, oh, I got to go see this like today. I have to go see this today. Like the first Omen I wanted to see because of like the style choices of that movie. And like when they put out that like 70s style trailer, I'm like, okay, this is what the vibe of the movie that they're going for. So like, I'm really into that. And it is a slower burn of a movie, but that is very much that style of movie. It's like when they did like House of the Devil, when Ty West did House of the Devil, like that's great. It's very much a 70s movie that's very slow. And then stuff happens in the last 5 minutes. That's that movie. I like The Innkeepers. That's the thing. There's Ty West did some great stuff before also. But I think it's not as well received because they weren't like slashers. I think that's the other thing. They were very just like style choices of like different periods of horror. So I don't know. I mean, I'm more so than not, whether or not you like the new Halloween movies or not, I think they were exciting that they were coming because people were talking about a big franchise coming back and doing something. And I think some of the like the smaller indie stuff I think is fine, but I think it is really dominated by A24 in that conversation as far as like what's coming out like in theaters. I think that like that artsy like horror just doesn't do it for me. I mean, we've talked about that in the past, that just really doesn't do it for me. So I don't find myself gravitating towards a lot of the stuff's cuts coming out. Like I said, first Omen was pretty good. I liked Immaculate. So there's some stuff that a lot of nun movies, coming out, but I like that stuff, but I don't know. There's just hasn't been anything that I'm watching that I'm like, this is just like a fun slasher. And that's what I miss. That's why I like the 70s and 80s so much. It's not that those movies are great, and I think a lot of people are nostalgic, but I think it's because we just got a lot more movies. We got a lot more horror. And I think that like Shudder's doing a lot. There's a lot there. There's a lot of horror coming out. So don't understand me. There's a lot of stuff coming out. But I just think that a lot of it is either like super low budget and bad. Like it's just not great. Like, like all this Winnie the Pooh shit. I'm so tired of all this crap. Like, that's what we're in now. We're in this age that just like I don't know why people were excited for those movies. Like they're just bad. Like, and I've seen the sequel, and yeah, it's better, but again, the bar is low. Like you can't be like, oh, this movie's amazing. Yeah, but it's still bad. So like now people are excited about the Avengers of like, trash IPs like for horror. I don't know. I'd rather have 5 more subpar Halloween movies than that. Because at the end of the day, at least I get to watch Michael Myers kill some people. And it's awesome. Like say what you will about those movies, but all the kills for the most part are awesome in those movies. And I just like a very like stripped down, like just slasher. And we just don't get, that's my favorite genre of horror anyway, is just slasher. So I think we just don't get a lot of them anymore. So I think that's kind of, it bums me out that we don't have a lot more like slasher type movies that are just like just having fun with their concept. I think, you don't need to vilify the killers, but that's like, again, that's what Scream used to be. Like it was like this little bit of mystery, but they were just like fun slashers. And so I think we don't have that anymore. I know you've seen a lot more of the modern stuff probably than I have. I'd be curious to think what you think the best movie of like the last year has been. Like horror wise.
I gotta actually think about it. I'm blanking, of course, while the recording of this
of course
posting, man.
I told you it's hard to be like, oh, but when is time? And I think because you cover movies and I like, because I'm not covering them like when they come out, my brain is like, when did this come out? Because my dates are like 70s, 80s. Like I'm not even covering like 90s or 2000s stuff. We're not even that horror genre. We're just in like the 70s and 80s. So my brain's like 72, 74, 80. Like, I don't know. When did it come out? 2001, 2002? I don't know. Like,
yeah.
So I don't know.
So we're almost done. I just got a couple questions.
Okay.
What is the best advice someone has given you for your YouTube channel or you as a creator?
That's given to me. Hey, that sucks. Don't do that anymore. That's the biggest advice that's been given to me, is like brutally honest advice to be like, hey, you're boring. Or I talk really fast. If people that have never watched me before, I talk very fast. So me making a 5-minute video is like akin to somebody else making like a 25-minute video because of the information that I'm going to give you like rapidly. And I've been told to like slow down and stuff like that. And I've tried. It's not for me. I just like to talk really, really fast. And, hopefully people can understand what I'm saying most of the time. But I think that was kind of like in a like joking, like, honest way. I think that was kind of the best advice that was given to me. Like, one, do what you want to do. And like, just own it. Like whether or not like you do that. And I had a conversation with a fellow creator who doesn't do horror stuff. He does video game stuff, like JRPG stuff. Just the Gems. He's great, Brandon. But it was one of those things where he talked about where it's like, he just kind of like stopped looking at the numbers for things. And so I think that was kind of a good actual piece of advice. Like, early on it was like, hey, this just isn't working, or like, this is not good, or you're belaboring the point. You're talking too much about this one thing. Like if you're going to talk about it, be concise in your information. And so I still think I have to balance that, because I could talk forever or not talk at all. So I think it's hard for me to have that middle 10 to 11 minutes is hard for me. I'm either talking for 20 or 7. It's like that hard part, because I can be very long-winded, but I can also be very concise. So I think I have to kind of balance it out. But yeah, it's one of those things early on that was like, hey, I think there's a lot of positivity, and I'm not saying that like, I think we should be negative, but I think sometimes if you really know the person that you're wanting to help, I think you do need to be honest. I think there's got to be some level of honesty and being like, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have that. I would still be stumbling through, or I might not even be doing it anymore. But like people being like, and I've been lucky that I don't really have a lot of negativity. Like even when I make videos, I don't get people. I got one the other day, which was like, this guy is boring and should stop making videos. And like, oh, he didn't even edit anything. And I'm like, so it's like, obviously I know it's like not an accurate thing because we both know that I edit a shit ton in my videos. So somebody saying that it's like long-winded and not edited is crazy to me. Now, I don't script anything. So yes, I do talk sometimes. Like I just, so I don't think I edit in that form, but I have tons of clips and I make every intro new. And so like I edit a lot. So it's funny. You kind of got, that's a one-off of like people just being assholes, like just being like, yeah, you suck. And you're like, okay. Like, but that's very far and few between. I think because of the type of stuff I talk about, it's like lower key. So I don't know what I would do with like 200,000 people coming across me and being like, yeah, he's boring. He just keeps talking about this old ass movie that I don't care about. So I think that's advice I would give. Just like if you're giving advice to somebody that's been given to me, like, hey, like this could be better, like positive, like constructive feedback, but also that positivity being like, man, just keep going. Don't worry about, you got to worry about a little bit because if you're making stuff and it's not hitting, like I think you should focus on that, but don't worry about if 1,000 people are watching your video. Just keep making videos. And the biggest thing I could give the advice to somebody would be, I know that's your next question. The biggest advice I would give to somebody is to just keep making them, but like in your mind, don't just put out videos to put out videos because that's not going to help you any. Really think about each time you're making one, especially starting out. No one's watching your videos. Let's just be very frank and honest. It doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter if you make one video or 30 videos. Just make the best video you can and really focus on watching that video and being very open to the criticism and the constructive feedback. And if somebody says it's bad, like think about it for a little bit. Don't dwell on it. But somebody may genuinely be being like, yeah, this is not good. Like it may not, I know we take it as like somebody just being mean like to you, like, oh, they're just hurting my feelings. But no, maybe it's genuinely not good. Maybe your video is bad. Like I think I watched some videos of mine and I'm like, even new ones, I'm like, oh man, I could have done that better. I could have done that better. Like, so I think if you just really objectively look at your videos and watch your own videos, because I think sometimes people don't go back. Like they're always moving forward. But I think you should just strive to make the next video better than the last one. And really watch it and be like, whether it's editing, whether it's thumbnails, whether it's whatever it is, try and make it better. Because I think that's what as a YouTuber, that's what you want to do. It's just like, and take the feedback. If somebody, like if it's not engaging, rewatch that video and find out why it's not engaging. Like if you're looking at your watch time and been like, hey, the same amount, 2,000 people watch this video and this video, but they only watch this video for an average of 2 minutes, but they watch this video for an average of 8 minutes. Is it the content? Is it the actual like movie I'm talking about it? Or is it me? I think sometimes you got to look at that stuff and be like, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I wasn't as engaging. Maybe I was long-winded for 2 minutes before I started talking about the movie. I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes I start a video and I'm talking about like 2 minutes of like random stuff before I'm even talking about the movie. And that could be why. Like, hey, I didn't get in. People came to hear me talk about this movie and I'm talking about something completely different for a minute. So that'd be the advice I give. It's just like really be looking at your stuff, but just make stuff. I think even obviously Mr. Beast is like a weird thing. Like don't relate to that either. But like he always said, like your first 100 videos don't matter. Like make 100 videos and then you get to complain. And I think that's very true. Like you can't complain 20 videos in that nobody's watching your videos. You haven't done anything. You're unimportant and you really don't matter on a platform that has millions of people. So I think you really have to think about like, make your niche, make it good, find out what you're good at talking about, and then hone in on that and make it the best you can. I think that's all you can do. Like if Frankie, you do your stuff, you just got to keep honing what you're doing. Like just do what you want to do. And that's the thing. Do what you want to do. Don't do it just for the views either. Because eventually it's going to come off as like inauthentic. If you're like, oh, he's just doing this because like he knows it's going to be a big topic. So I think YouTubers that are kind of all over the place, I think that can be why. Like if they're, or like even now, like horror is a saturated market for like making videos. So if you're just out here being like, well, I'm just going to cover Friday the 13th for the 1,000th time, like people may not watch your video. It's not that your opinion is any less valid than anybody else's, but I think if you don't have that niche of like finding like you for more, like I would watch you if I wanted to see some second sight stuff, I would come to you. There's just things that I think as creators, you kind of got to carve out and you don't know it right away, but find the thing that you really love, especially in physical media. Like so many people collect physical media and do those videos. So it's like, what is your niche that you're getting into? What are the videos that you're going to do? And like, that's why I would watch you. Like if I was looking at the sea of things, there's a lot of people that just go, look at all the movies I bought and that's it. And you're like, cool. But there's a lot of people that like go more in depth with like a specific, a boutique or a label or something like that, or a style of movie. So I think, just make a bunch of videos. They're not all going to work. They may not even be good. They may be bad. But, I always say, like, in the beginning, I made 5 videos and I put out 1.
Mhm.
So it was one of those things I just started. That's the biggest thing too. You just got to start and then keep going. And the
Mhm.
thing is, it's not for everybody either. I mean, I think that's a realistic thing too. Like, I think sometimes you have to be like, maybe this isn't for me. As much as you may want to do it, I think that's the other part we think where everybody's like, yeah, just do YouTube. It's for everybody. It's not. I mean, there's some people that can be super, or just understand that you may not be like successful overnight. It's
Mhm.
that one thing that like, hey, if you're going to do it and you love doing it, great. But then don't look at the other stuff. Like, don't look at the numbers. Don't worry about your subscribers. Don't worry about that stuff, because if you know you're not getting any views, but you love doing it, then it really doesn't matter. Like, I
Mhm.
love talking about horror, so it really doesn't matter to me. It's cool. And I, obviously over time, I hope that I can like move on, but and get more successful. But I'm doing it for like a very different reason.
Mhm.
So but that's kind of my advice. It's just like find your niche, do it, and just make stuff. Just make stuff, but be like critical of yourself. You're your biggest critic, and just don't compare yourself to other people either. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
last thing. It's just like you're probably looking at a YouTuber and being like, hey, I want to be like them, or you want to emulate them. Just do your own thing. But like, how long have they been doing that also? 6, 7 years? They're at the same point you are now, starting out. So I think you got to just be happy with the success that you have. And then it'll come more readily, and as opposed to just being like, oh, I want to have 100,000 subscribers. That's a cool
Mhm.
goal. Get to 1,000 first. Then
Yeah.
you can get to 10,000, you get to, 20,000. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what my advice would be, and kind of where I'm at, like mentally and thinking about YouTube. Like, I love doing it. I'm going to continue to do it, but I kind of don't really look at the numbers anymore. I use them as like why didn't that video work? Is there a reason specifically why it didn't work? But I'm not like, oh, if this video doesn't get 2,000 views, I'm done. Like, it's more like, it's cool when that happens. It's like, oh man, like I talked about Midnight and it got over 1,000 views. That's awesome,
Mhm.
because you don't expect it to happen. When I talk about physical media, if it gets 1,000 views, I kind of expect that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's pretty, reasonable for my channel at the size I'm at. Like, talking about stuff like that. But the weird movies I talk about, if one person watches it, I'm happy. Because like, oh man, like one person, I think we forget that. It's like, if 10 random people watch your video, that's kind of crazy. Now think about 100 or 1,000, like 2,000. That's crazy to me. Like,
Mhm.
think, hey, 2,000 people wanted to watch me talk about this weird movie from the 70s. That's crazy to me. That like blows my mind. So I think it's you got to remember that too. Like, when you're, especially in my like subgenre of like YouTube and what I'm talking about, the fact that 2,000 random people wanted to hear me talk about a movie that nobody's ever heard of and nobody cares about is kind of awesome. So, I mean, obviously it'll grow over time and I'll continue to do it. And I think I want more people to watch it, because I think I want to get the word out about these movies. It's more like, hey, I'd rather share more of these movies than it being like a content thing or a YouTube thing. I just
Mhm.
think more people should watch this type of horror. Like, I think that's kind of my thing. I'm just like championing this weird stuff.
Thank you, Chris, so much. That was pretty awesome. So thank you. All of his links to his social media accounts will be down in the description. Thank you, Chris. You've been a
No
really
problem.
good friend to me. For like I don't know, half a year, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it was about
Um,
January. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's been an awesome relationship, and we're doing some other collab videos. So yeah, guys, subscribe to Chris. Again, I'm going to leave it down all in the description videos. And thank you to all of my tier members. Thank you so much, especially John from Let's Talk Entertainment. Follow him, follow Chris,
Yeah. Follow
and
me. Do it. Watch
do
the
it
videos.
now.
Do it now.
But
Watch my weird movies. Yeah.
yeah, have a good one, guys.
Yep. See you guys later.